It is October 21st, 2021, and I'm here with World War II veteran George Kelchak, and this is his story. Okay, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted. It was my senior year in high school, Gary Frabel, and they drafted me before I graduated. But what happened was there was 2 or 3 of us, because of our age, the way it fell. We got the draft call while we were still in school. And the principal had a fit. She said, "You guys stay here in my office while I go to the Selective Service Board and discuss this problem. Why should you go 3 weeks before graduation into the Army when there's no need to?" The war was over at the time. It was a state of, we were in a state of war, I guess you would consider, until the peace treaties were signed. So we came back to the office and he said, "Okay, the 3 of us, guess what? You don't have to report for induction until a couple, 3 weeks or so." So that's what happened. And I got the call after I got my diploma, and I headed to Camp Atterbury for induction. And that's how I got into the Army. And from there, we went for basic training and everything. I went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and I don't know what happened to the other guys. Evidently, they went to the infantry. But they interviewed me, you know, in the office there at Camp Atterbury, and asked me all kind of questions like, "What can you do? What have you done while you were a civilian?" So as that went on, the guy says, "Well, we can't put you in the infantry. We've got to put you in the engineer corps. At least you'll be some use there for it." So that's how I ended off in the engineers.
How long did you do training for?
I was trained, well, I did 6 weeks, 8 weeks of basic training like everybody else. And then I went overseas on the ship here, listed here. And then there's pictures here of me on the ship and of course we never knew where we were going at that time. They didn't reveal, because there were some submarines, German submarines out there that might never got the word that the war is over, and sink the ship. So it's all I could remember was we landed in Leghorn, Italy, shipped out to, over there it was called Livorno, and they shipped us up to the Morgan Line. The Morgan Line was a line that was made by the Allies in Italy, and which was a dividing line between Yugoslavia and Italy. Now, Yugoslavia was basically partisans fighting. They weren't in the regular Yugoslav army. They were, Marshal Tito was the premier at that time. So they kept, so now they had to keep the peace. So we were always running around with bayonets on and breaking up crowds. They were unhappy. They didn't want to go to, because they knew that the Allies, which was Roosevelt and Churchill and who was the other guy? Joe Stalin. And you know, all the homes there were stucco, white stucco, and on the stucco, about a foot from the top, it would have a silhouette of Joe Stalin, sickle and hammer and stuff like that, and everything telling the Allies at the time that we're sticking with the commies, which was Joe Stalin. And as a result, there was a lot of friction. Nobody was happy. even that the war was over, supposedly, but the state of war wasn't over. But they, finally they decided that it's time to sign the peace treaty, and the map up here that I have shows the breakup of the results of the peace treaty. You know, France gets this, Yugoslavia gets this, Italy they leave this for Italy. They take all their possessions away from them in Africa, like Libya and all those others, and they put them, they give them independence. So the Africans, around the Suez Canal and up there through that was basically Italian possessions, you know, different factions and all that. That stuff was still on the other side of the Rock of Gibraltar, is what it was. So basically, they were. So we, you know, we would be. We served outpost duty, they called it, where you, when you're on an outpost, that people coming in and out had to be not like the United States where it's wide open. Over there, no such thing. I mean, you know, like one night, I went up on outpost duty, and I heard metal clang, 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 and it was tanks. I says, oh shit, how? I said to my buddy, we can't stop those tanks. I says, listen to them. They were rumbling and they're coming up to the line. They finally stopped, and the leader of the tank corps was English. He spoke to me and said, I got a pass to go through to the Allied side. And so I said, at least I didn't have to worry about it. I said, go ahead, go, you're on your way. So he crossed the line, went into Italy. It was, I would say that it was good duty in a way. When I got there, I purified water. For all the companies, they would have drinking water, water to drinking and for cooking. So I ran a water point, 3 guys and myself. We ran a water point in a town called Plava, Montecucco de Plava in Italy. And we pumped water out of the river into a big swimming pool about as big as this room and about as tall as this room. And then we had a pump. We pumped water out of that into the tank, and then I would check it, see if it's drinkable. If it isn't, then I would chlorinate it. And then the people on the line would come in, drive in with their Jeep, with their little tank in the back, and I'd fill up the tank. And so I supplied them with clean water. And I did that for 5 months or so, whatever. Ran a water purification unit, which was, it was good duty in a way, but cold. So effing cold that you couldn't believe in it. It was always freezing, always, you know. Here I was dealing with water, and when you're with water, you're wet most of the time, and who knows what. So all you did was try to keep warm. That was the secret, keep warm. And like, take the helmet, take a bath. That's the only way we took a bath. I did anyway. Buddy system. Fill up the 5-gallon bucket, because we lived in a tent, 4-man tent, and it was had a belly stove in the middle. So it was so hot all the time, that stove, that the sides were melting to just melting. They were all crinkled up, the tank, the stove, but that was the only way. I'd pour water on my buddy, and he suds himself real quick because it was so effing cold. We couldn't breathe in there. And then it was my turn, and he would do me. So that was it. And to go, to relieve ourselves or anything, we had to go outside the four-man tent, and we found whatever it was, I guess to the river. It was a outlet to the river, and we go there and do our duty, and then come running back frozen. So it wasn't, that part was unhappy. But dealing with people over there was a good deal. I enjoyed dealing with the jugs, we call them jugs, but they're Yugoslavs, Slovenians as a whole. The people were good to us. They weren't, even though the partisans had a $500 levy on us. If you kill an American soldier and prove it, you got $500. So I heard some of that happening now, but in some of the, somewhere it was, where they had a bounty on American soldiers. But anyway, I know what it feels like when you hear the bullets whistle over your head. You know, I say, whoa, what's that? Now, I found out in a hurry somebody was taking pot shots at me, or we'd be wanting to go to the river because we had outdoor outhouses there. The company did, and so we'd be moonlight out there, and we said, oh man, I don't like this. We were in the valley, the Isonzo Valley, and with the river going down the middle. I said, oh no, I'm not going out in that moonlight because everybody could see us. I mean, they could just be sitting on the side of the mountain there taking pot shots, which they were doing. I said, you know, this is not for me. So you'd be on your belly and you go right back to the shadows because it wasn't safe. And the only time we saw any action was, I got pictures here of rioting going on in the major cities of Trieste and Gorizia. This one was Gorizia, that we were 15 miles out. So whenever we were needed to quell the uprising, we loaded trucks, headed into town, break it up. So that was part of, I was a result of the peace treaty that's on that map. It shows what sections went to which country, and there's some action showing what's going on, what happened in Gorizia. And we had our major hospital there, but we survived, and then when the peace treaty was signed, they said, load the trucks and we're going home. So back to Livorno, on the trucks, zip back to the States. 10 days or so trip, and on a general ship was a General Hershey. The one we went over it was here. I got the paperwork on it. I got some stuff maybe you might be interested in. It was weekly letter that you got on a ship telling you where you were going, and all that monkey business was here. And then there's shots over here of me working at the water point and on a ship heading to Europe, to the Mediterranean Sea. And some of these areas where we stayed was, we took over some facilities that the workers that ran the hydroelectric plant down the road. So we stayed in there. There were nice quarters if you got them. And here's my tent that I lived in, and the parka. We had winter clothes, which was parkas, and something more substantial than the army. This is a summer suntan, as they called it. So I don't know, unless you've got something to ask me about what else.
What infantry regiment were you a part of?
The 350th Infantry Regiment, the 88th Division. So,
Do you also know what company and battalion or no?
well, the company was, I believe it was Company C. You know, that's 80 years ago. Forget that. I still remember my rifle number. You know, when an officer would run up to his, what's your rifle number? 458-766-663. Oh, okay. Just spit it out. If you hesitated, you did something wrong.
What kind of weapon did you carry?
It was I carried an M1 rifle, and also we had the shell. There's a shell there of a mortar shell. That's a 35 millimeter mortar shell. The one I was basically with was an 81 millimeter. It was a big one. That was and we had like 4-man or 5-man team that operated it. And here it shows me firing some of the mortars on here, if you were interested in that. But overall, it was fast duty to get in and out. The map here, I think the map will show you what it fell apart, so my son put it all together. He gave you the map here.
What year did you go into?
1946, 47.
Okay, so it was after the war.
Yeah, post-war. They still decided to fight. I don't know. But that is the peace treaty, what happened after the war, what size army they were allowed to keep, and all these different sections. So I was on the Morgan line, which was down here in this section, towards France and Italy and all that business. So it's kind of, you know, I don't regret my army life. I really enjoyed it in a way. It was my way to see the world, because when we were kids, we didn't go anywhere. We were depression kids, and no car in the family, so I got to visit all these places. And what we did was, basically, we didn't make enemies, we made friends up there, and that's what happened. You know, I'd visit them. They used to, you know, they had nothing. There's kids in here. It shows a pile of kids that they would wait, or we would empty our foods, any leftover food for them to take home, and they would take it all home, everything, feed the family, and you know, if you had coffee, you were a good guy. If you got coffee and you handed out coffee, it was like passing out gold coins. That's how coffee was considered.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor happened?
Pearl Harbor, I was in school.
What did you think of it at the time?
Well, I learned to dislike the Japanese for the sneak attack. It was kind of, I think that was underhanded what they did. They figured, their generals figured out that's what we're going to do.
Did you ever worry about going against the Japanese if you were ever sent to over the Pacific?
No, you know, you know how we were at that time, our kids, the young 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. If we were told to go, we went. We did it and did the job, and turned around and says, send me back. But I never had anything to do with the Japanese. I didn't dislike them. I disliked them because of the way they handled how they fought the war too. They're sneaky.
Where were you when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Were you in training?
You know, whatever it is, I remember when the bombs were dropped, everybody poured into the streets celebrating, you know. They knew the war is ending because, you know, a super bomb. Often do people drop bombs on it like that. I mean, they did Japan. They bombed Japan incessantly. Once they got midway, and they recaptured some of the other islands. Then they can fly their aircraft out of there, and they did well against Japan. I've been in Pearl Harbor twice, just to sightsee, and I saw the ships sunk in a harbor at Pearl Harbor. It kind of turns you off, you know. Well, you know, we had a different. There was a different atmosphere. Everybody wanted to go into the Army. People were signing up. People were just doing everything they could for the war effort. The war effort was like working at the plant where they made these bombs in Indiana. They made those in Indiana and other munitions. There's still bunkers that I remember, about big as this room, at least, and dirt, 2 feet of dirt over it, and they stored all the munitions before they send them out to wherever they were needed. So the women did a marvelous job keeping the Army supplied, keeping it, like, what is it? Hitler made a statement. We will never defeat the Americans. As fast as we can destroy anything that they have, they build it up tomorrow. And they were really good at it. The recovery was good. So what won the war was our ability to produce, you know. I don't know about what the story is now. It's probably my grandson is in the Navy, and he's very concerned about it. He's going on an aircraft carrier, a Nimitz class, which is the big atomic driven, and he's kind of worried. He says because they're going to mess around Formosa, around Japan, that we don't get into it again. So he's got a family and all, and so things are not good out there anymore. Yeah. But during the World War II, everybody won. The old guys, 50s, 60s, joining the Army.
Even veterans for World War I.
Yeah, veterans. You've probably interviewed some of the old guys.
Well, the oldest I've interviewed, he just turned 103.
103, see.
He doesn't even use a walker or cane.
No, he's in good shape. 103.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be 95 in April. So I was just a year younger than my brother. So, but I got out of the bad stuff, you know, that you read about now, and from all these veterans. I didn't have a party, but it was better than some of the infighting that everybody got into. And I mean, if I had to do it, I had to do it. That's all. That was the way I felt.
What was your rank?
Well, my rank is Sergeant First Class. But you know, you had to work up to it eventually.
Did you have any brothers who fought in the war too?
No, I didn't. I had two brothers that were in. One brother was in the Army, but he was a dentist, so he got away from. What he did was fix everybody's teeth in the service. So he was a dentist, and the other brother was a divinity student. So being a divinity student, he stayed out of the Army. he was like on call or something. I don't know what they called it, but he never entered the service.
I see you were also in the Korean War.
Well, the Korean War, I served. Let's see, I served 4 years in the Army Reserve. You know, at home. I was on the home front, so I
So
never
you didn't
went
see
home.
no combat.
I didn't see no combat, but we went to. We were every year for 2 weeks. We'd go to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, Fort Knox, Kentucky for training.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we went 2 solid weeks to training, where my company let me go because they had a contract with the government to keep the. Well, it's similar setup that Switzerland has. Switzerland does not have a standing army. Where they're all on call. Everybody is in the Army Reserve. So if they're called, they take their rifle with them at home, their equipment home, everything's at home. And if they're called, immediately they're gone. But Switzerland's never been in a war. You know what I mean? They had a way to get out of it, and that was by using their reserves.
Well, actually, this is a lesson of fact. Germany was planning to invade Switzerland.
The what?
Germany was planning to invade Switzerland.
Well, most likely, yes.
But they didn't.
They didn't do
it.
But I know that they wanted Czechoslovakia because of the Skoda works. Skoda was the munitions plant, the biggest munitions plant in Europe, and that they needed it. They needed it for the war effort, because Germany is just an average country like size of Texas or who knows.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But the Germans were especially. I met German soldiers at the war ended. They were a different breed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think they were pounded. Everything was pounded into their brains. The Americans are more. I don't give a shit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They do what they're told, and if they want to do more, fine. But I don't think nowhere were we ever as strict as the Russians. The Russians and the Russians were more back a ragtag army too. At first, they were not any good. I did bring some.
Were you also an interpreter?
I interpreted when I needed to.
What language did you speak?
Slovak, a Slovenian language. So since I was stationed on the Morgan Line in Yugoslavia, on the Yugoslav border, I was handy as far as speaking to people. I could understand them to the point where I could interpret it to you.
Mm-hmm.
What did she say or he say? So it came in handy for me.
Can you give me an example of some Czechoslovakian you said that?
Oh.
I won't understand it.
Let's see. Jak tam idzie? Co ty robisz? What are you doing? I'm with the American Wojsko, American Army, and do you wish me to help you? Can I? I'm forgetting that the language too.
Mm-hmm.
It's been years, but I did speak, and it helped me in many ways. So it pays to be able to speak more than one language.
How did you learn Czechoslovakian or Czech?
From my parents, they spoke. When my mother and father married, they were both from Europe.
So you were born in Czechoslovakia?
No,
Oh, okay.
born here, but they were born there. My parents were born in Czechoslovakia.
Did your father serve in World War One?
And no, for some reason, I always asked him, how come he never got drafted or whatever? He says he doesn't know why. He was farming at that time, and he says, nobody bothered me, I just went about my business when he was single. But his relatives, some of the relatives all belonged to the service, because I got pictures of them at home. But
I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you, George, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
well, I thought maybe there was more to it than this.
Yeah. I asked as many questions as I can think of.
I was prepared, like, there's my drafted picture.